I am calling to order the Landmark Preservation Commission meeting of January 23rd, 2024, and it is 1:00 p.m. The first thing that we do is introduce the commissioners. We introduce ourselves. I'll start. I'm Julie Johnson. I'm a Historic Preservation Project Manager, and I was nominated by the community at large. Larry, you want to start?
I'm Larry Sykes. I'm an architect and I was nominated by History Colorado.
Graham Johnson, a Preservation Project Manager nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Hi, I'm George Dennis, retired law enforcement. I was nominated by History Colorado.
Hello, I'm Gary Petrie. I'm an architect and I was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Hi, I'm Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant nominated by the community at large.
I'm Nick Fusianis. I'm an architect and developer, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
Hi, I'm Erin Hummel. I'm a landscape architect and I was nominated by the Society of American Landscape Architects. What?
I'm Ann Rottenberg. I'm an architect nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
And I'm Brittany Bryant, Denver Landmark Preservation staff.
Thanks, everybody. So before we begin, for those of you joining us virtually, some audio tips for you all. For better sound quality, we encourage you to download Zoom on your desktop, laptop, tablet, or your mobile device. You can click audio settings to bring up the additional menu, add a background noise suppression, which is really helpful. Test your speaker and microphone, adjust the maximum output volumes. For presenters or public commenters, when it is your turn to speak, to mute or unmute, you can click on the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. And you can expand the menu next to the microphone will reveal additional options. You can select your speaker and microphone services or devices and test your microphone and speakers, adjust the maximum output volumes. And if you still have audio challenges, it's best to just switch to your phone for audio. All right, the first thing on our agenda is the approval of meeting records from January 9, 2024. Does anybody have any comments, any corrections to those two set meeting minutes? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting records for January 9th.
Erica, thank you. A second?
Second.
Graham has seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Oh, they approved unanimously as presented. Thank you, staff. So this is a public comment period. At the beginning of every meeting, we reserve some time for the public to comment on historic preservation in general, not specific to any projects. The members of the public have up to 2 minutes each for comments about historic preservation, like I said, in general, not to include comments associated with specific projects that we'll be reviewing later today. Okay, this is just in general in the city of Denver. If you are joining us by phone, please dial *9 on your keypad to raise your hand, or you can email landmark@denvergov.org with your name, phone number. And if you're joining by computer, obviously you just click on the little hand raise button at the bottom of your screen. Taylor, do we have anybody?
And just for clarity, if you're here for the Montview application, there will be a public comment period later for that as well.
No answer. Nope, nobody in general. Anyone here in person for a general comment? Doesn't look like it. Okay, great. All right, then moving on to our consent agenda. The consent are routine design review items recommended for commissioner approval without discussion. Applicants with items passed on the consent agenda should coordinate with their staff person to get your certificate of appropriateness. There is no public comment during the consent agenda. I will announce the consent agenda. I'll ask the commissioners if they have any desire to remove the item off the consent agenda. The commission members will need to announce any ex parte conflicts of interest at this time. And then the commission makes a motion and will vote. The consent agenda, we have only one item on today. It is 2024-COA-029 at 115 West Cedar Avenue in the Baker neighborhood. Any comments, commissioners? Any concerns? All right, do I hear a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda with item 2024-COA-029 at 115 West Cedar Avenue.
Graham, thank you. Do I hear a second? Second. George has seconded it. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, the consent agenda has been approved unanimously. Thank you very much, Brittany. All right, so now we are getting to our public hearing process. I will announce the public hearing agenda by address. Commission members will need to announce any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest. Thank you. Sorry, my glasses are on their last legs. Staff will introduce the application and recommendation. Commissioners can question staff. The applicant presentation will be limited to 10 minutes. Commissioners can ask questions of the applicant. The owner presentation also has 10 minutes and the commissioners can question the applicant as well. Public comment period for the public hearing process is 3 minutes per person. And if you would like to speak and you are not part of the applicant and owner team and you're joining us virtually, use the hand raise button for those calling via phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Or otherwise you can send us an email at landmark@denvergov.org prior to the public comment period. And then anyone here obviously who has come in person will have their opportunity to speak for the 3 minutes if you choose. Staff will be able to clarify if necessary, then the commission will deliberate and then the commission will make a motion and vote. So the first thing we need to do is I need any commission members that need to recuse themselves to do so.
Madam Chairman, if I could recuse myself, I've got the cord on both sides of the conversation here.
Okay, Graham has recused himself, George as
I have
well.
to recuse myself.
Okay, and Gary?
I had conversations at, Historic Denver.
Okay, great. Gentlemen.
So we'll wait for you to leave the room.
Yeah.
And then we'll get started. You should be able to control the slides.
All right, Abby, anytime you are ready.
Okay, thank you. So we are here for a landmark designation hearing for 5013 East Montview Boulevard. So in a staff presentation, I will first start by covering the process for designation, kind of how we got here. Then I will review the designation criteria, discuss the application that's under review today, and then I'll finish with giving the staff evaluation of the application. So historic designation in Denver is a community-driven process. So designations can either be submitted by owners of a property, the manager of community planning and development, members of city council, or by 3 residents of Denver. So in this case, we have 3 residents of Denver who have come forward to submit this application. So this application began through our demolition review process. So in Denver, Landmark Preservation reviews the proposed demolition of all primary structures. So any structure, regardless of whether or not it, where it's located, when it's built, we review all demolition. And we review that demolition to determine whether or not any of the buildings proposed for demolition have the potential to be designated as Denver Historic Landmarks. So Landmark staff had 10 business days to determine if the structure has potential for designation based on our ordinance. The demolition application for 5013 East Montview was submitted to Landmark on August 28th, 2023. Doing that initial review, Landmark did determine that it had the potential for designation. That is, limited time frame there. So we're mainly, looking for potential, doing initial research and seeing if it looks like, there's the possibility that a building could be eligible. So we determined that 5013 East Montview had the potential for designation. And so we posted the property. So this means we put up signs at the property, as you see here, an image of the sign that was posted that have information on contacting Landmark, what's proposed, and an outline of the posting dates. So the posting was put up on September 14th, 2023. And then at the same time that the property is physically posted, we also send out notifications to adjacent registered neighborhood organizations, interested community groups, and city council. So our designation process in Denver is a community-driven process. So the reason we post is to let members of the community know that we've found a structure to have the potential for designation so that they have the opportunity to submit a designation if they would like. If members of the community are interested in submitting a designation application, they can file a notice of intent. So it's a notice of intent to file a designation. In this case, a notice of intent was submitted on September 25th. When a notice of intent is submitted, that extends our designation period. So it gives additional time frame in the posting, and this time is for those submitting the notice of intent, the stakeholders from the community to have time to meet in a facilitated meeting with the owners of the property to see if they could negotiate other options besides demolition. So once the notice of intent was filed on September 25th, that extended the posting period to November 13th. Facilitated stakeholder meetings were then held. Only one facilitated stakeholder meeting is required, but in this case, there were several meetings. So meetings on October 17th, October 31st, and November 9th. So various discussions, seeing if other options could be found to be able to at least partially preserve the home. No agreement was reached. So on November 13th, which was the final deadline for submitting an application, 3 members of the community came together to submit a designation application. However, negotiations did continue. There was continued discussion, particularly discussion of whether or not a preservation-minded buyer could be found for the property. So the owners, along with members of the community, came to an agreement for a 42-day extension to kind of provide some additional time for the property to be posted on real estate listings to see if a buyer might emerge. So this 42-day agreement for an extension was approved by the commission on December 12th and took effect that day. So today, January 23rd, that's the expiration of that 42-day extension, and that brings us to the commission hearing for the designation application. So 5013 East Montview Boulevard. You see the location here in Park Hill, located on Montview Boulevard. So this is located in Council District 9 in Park Hill. It's at the corner of Montview Boulevard and Elm Street. And we have with us today both the owners. So it's owned by Reinhardt Living Trust, Mark and Mary Ann Reinhardt, and then the applicants, Margaret McRoberts, Trish Leary, and Bernadette Kelly. So here is the proposed boundary for the designation. So it pretty much just follows the lot lines of the home. So how does a building become a landmark? What are the requirements for landmark designation? So following our ordinance, in order to be designated, a property must maintain its integrity. And that we mean its historical integrity. It needs to be more than 30 years old, are of exceptional importance. It needs to meet at least 3 of our 10 criteria. And the LPC needs to consider the historic context and the connection of the landmark to a broader context of Denver history. So here are our 10 criteria. So in this designation application, the applicants have identified 4 criteria that they believe that the property meets. So criteria B, that there's a direct and substantial association with a recognized person or groups of persons who had influence on society. Criteria C, embodies the distinctive visible characteristics of an architectural style. D, significant example of the work of a recognized master builder. And finally, F, representing an established and familiar feature of the Park Hill neighborhood due to its prominent location and physical characteristics. So I'll run through then these criteria as presented in the application, just to give you a brief summary. So criteria B, in the statement of significance, the application states that the property is significant for an association with Harry Huffman. He was a local theater entrepreneur. He built the Aladdin Theater and owned several other theaters in Denver, including the Bluebird Theater. And at one point was the manager of a large group of theaters in Denver. He lived in this house from 1934 when the house was constructed to 1938. And this was the period where Huffman's career was really taking off and he was becoming really prominent in the theater community in Denver. And so the argument there that this really kind of represents the house associated with the rise of his career. The statement of significance in the application also mentions Mary Elizabeth, known as Betty Hawley. She was active in the community as a philanthropist. She was a board member and fundraiser for Denver Symphony Orchestra, as well as other organizations. And Betty lived in the house with her husband, Robert, from 1949 to 1959. The application then in the statement of significance also mentions Alston and Allison McCarthy. They own the Universal Tractor Company. It's not really called out if there's particular significance there, but they did live in the house for the longest period of time. They lived in the house from 1959 to 2022. So then criteria C. Embodying the distinctive visible characteristics of an architectural style. So this property is in the Italian Renaissance Revival style. This style was popular from 1890 to 1935. So this property, falls at the end of that, built in 1934. So it's really kind of at the end of the popularity of the style. And it is a very kind of simple version of the style. This probably reflects the fact that it was being constructed during the Great Depression. But it does still maintain the key features of the style as called out in style guides, such as McAllister's Guide to House Styles. So it has low pitch hipped roof that is clad in red tile, stucco walls, round arched entry, prominent chimney, brick trim, decorative brackets above the window there on the facade, and upper story windows that are smaller than those on the first floor. Then there is criteria D, being a significant example of a work of a recognized architect or master builder. So in this case, the architect of the property is not known. You can see that this is a copy of the building permit card. So the contractor is DM Sugg is identified here, but no architect is identified. So it's believed that DM Sugg may have also been designing the home. Sugg constructed many homes in East Denver, including 2025 East 4th Avenue and 150 Franklin Street. And he built 5013th East Montview on speculation. So he was both the owner and builder. And then when the property was completed, he sold it to Huffman. And then finally, criteria F, representing established and familiar feature of a neighborhood due to its prominent location or physical characteristics. So 5013th East Montview faces onto Montview Parkway Historic District. This is a corner lot. It's a prominent location on Montview, located between the Park Hill Masonic Lodge and the Park Hill United Methodist Church. It's on and this is a primary route that it's located through through Park Hill. Okay. So then finally, bring you to the staff evaluation of the application. So as mentioned previously, a structure must meet these criteria in order to be designated as a Denver landmark. It needs to maintain its integrity, which landmark staff finds it does. Needs to be more than 30 years old. It was built in 1934, so it meets that. It needs to meet at least 3 of 10 criteria. And in this case, landmark staff find that it only meets 2 of 10 criteria, as is laid out in this application. When we review an application, we are really only reviewing the application. So, we're only, our ordinance lays out that we're just reviewing what is put forward before us. We are not, so when staff is doing this evaluation, it's strictly based on what was submitted, not on any larger research of the community. And then finally, the historic context, which in this case, landmark staff found to be incomplete in the application as presented. So the integrity evaluation. Staff found that there were fairly minimal changes that did not really impact the ability of the house to convey its significance. There has been a second story addition added onto the garage, which you can see in that photo below, and some of the windows have been replaced. But we find it, remains its historic form, as you can see on that Sanborn map image, has its original location, design, materials, workmanship, setting, feeling, association. We all feel are fairly strong. This is an evaluation of historical integrity. So design, materials, workmanship, setting, feeling, association. It is not a physical condition assessment. So I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the physical condition of the property, but just to clarify, this is not part of our integrity evaluation. Landmark designation is not dependent on the physical condition, just the historical integrity. So the staff evaluation of the criteria. So the landmark ordinance states that an application for designation shall describe the appearance of the structure or district and shall demonstrate how the structure or district meets the criteria for designation set forth herein. So in this case, landmark staff found that the application submitted did not adequately demonstrate how the structure met 2 of the criteria that were selected. So staff found that the application established that the property meets criteria C and F. So these are really the visual criteria. So criteria C being the architectural significance, criteria F being being a visually prominent part of the Park Hill neighborhood. But these criteria are not ones that require, extensive research. It's more, a visual analysis if they meet those criteria. Criteria B and D, which is the association with a significant person and with a master builder, are criteria that do require more research to really establish both the connections with the property and the significance of the individuals. And in this case, the application did not submit any new research. There wasn't really any new research on the individuals or their significance beyond what was submitted in the demolition staff report. And as I said previously, that staff report is really an initial kind of analysis. It's not an in-depth research. And so we felt then, this just presented that same information and didn't have any of the additional research to really establish those connections. So ideally, to be eligible, you'd establish a substantial connection between 5013 East Montview Boulevard and Huffman, as well as a substantial connection with Sugg, showing that it was a significant example of his work. And for Huffman, we would expect to see documentation of the influential role that he had in the movie theater business. And for Sugg, documentation of his influential role in construction and design. So criteria B. So direct and substantial association with a recognized person who had influence on society. So in this case, Harry Huffman. But it's unclear, is Harry Huffman really strongly associated with this property? He did only live there for 4 years. And there are two other houses that are associated with Huffman that survive that have longer associations. So the house he lived in before this, 785 St. Paul Street, where he lived from 1916 to 1934. And then Shangri-La, the house he built after this house, which he completed in 1938. And so there really needs to be a very clear argument here for why this particular house is key. So the demolition staff report suggested that I mentioned earlier that could potentially be because this was really associated when his career was rising. But in order to make that case, you really need an analysis of his career and why these years are particularly important to make that connection. And that connection isn't in the designation. So really kind of lacking a clear argument for why these 4 years that he was here were particularly significant, as well as his larger influence on Denver society. So then with criteria D, being an example of a work of a recognized architect or master builder. There's not a clear case to be made for SUG as a master builder in the application. We really need more discussion of his work, more examples beyond the couple that were given of what he constructed. Because we really need those other examples to figure out, is this a significant example of his work? And to be able to compare it to other examples to see that this is a significant one and to have more of a context of the type of builder that SUG was. So our evaluation of the historic context and the period of significance. So staff finds that the historic context does not clearly articulate how the structure relates to significant individual or individuals. For Huffman, there really needed to be more movie theater context to make a case for Holly, more of a discussion of her role in philanthropy in Denver, and for SUG, more of the, what was going on in the 1930s in construction, what other properties did he construct, and were there other speculative builders in the 1930s? Was he a prominent one? So we really need more information there to establish that historic context. For the period of significance, the application identifies 1933 to 1993 as the period of significance. This is based on criteria F. As stated in the application, 5013 East Montview has remained a prominent residential structure on Montview Boulevard, never changing in primary use. So we have received quite a bit of public comment on this application. So comments that we received prior to the LPC agenda posting were included in the posting materials on our website. And that included 1 individual letter in support and 68 individual letters in opposition. It also included support letters from 2 organizations, a support letter from Greater Park Hill Community and from Historic Berkeley Regis. Since the designation application was posted on our website last Tuesday, we've received additional public comment. So we received 20 individual letters in support and 2 letters in opposition. And then we also received 2 additional letters of support from organizations, so a letter of support from City Park West and a letter of support from the Whittier Neighborhood Association. And those were all emailed to the commission members yesterday. The owner also submitted comments. So there was a letter from his legal team at Davis, Graham and a letter from Mark and Marian Reinhardt was submitted. They also submitted some additional research materials that they felt were relevant to their argument that the property does not qualify for designation. So they submitted a thesis on movie theaters, on 7th Avenue, copies of the landmark research that had been done for the demolition review, deeds, support letters, and then a report from HIE Consulting Engineers and a report from Broadway Property Inspections. And all of those materials were also provided to the commissioners. Sorry, skip past the important slide there. So then just finally, the final review criteria for the commission to, base their evaluation on. Is it over 30 years of age? Does it meet at least 3 criteria? So in this case, the staff recommendation is that it does not. Staff finds that it only meets 2, C and F, which are highlighted there in green. We find that it does not, that the application as presented does not make a substantial enough case for criteria B and criteria D. We did find that it retains integrity, but we did not find that it had a substantial enough historic context to support the criteria identified. The Landmark staff is recommending that the commission deny the application based on insufficient evidence that the structure meets Landmark ordinance criteria B and D or is related to historic context or theme.
Abby, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Abby? Not a month. Okay, great. Thank you very much. All righty. Is our applicant, the applicant's next, right?
Yeah, applicant will be next, and then we'll
Alright.
follow it with the homeowners.
So the applicant would like to come up here? Uh-huh.
Okay. Should we stand or sit down?
Oh, you can sit, absolutely. So between the 2 of you, you'll have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and please begin with your name and your address for our records.
You want me to push the start button?
No, I will.
Okay, good.
Yeah, figure out who's driving, right? Yeah.
Thank you, commissioners. We are grateful that you are listening to our opinion. My name is Trish Leary, and I live about 3 blocks from the Montview home. Many other people in our Park Hill neighborhood, in addition to us, the applicants, care deeply about preserving the integrity and the historic nature of Montview Boulevard. I'm optimistic that you will hear our concerns and vote to preserve the exterior of this beautiful historic property. Before we focus on the criteria for the landmark process, we'd like to just address a few misconceptions that have evolved over the past couple of months. Many people have repeated the incorrect information that this home is structurally unstable. There's no evidence to support this. The interior is in need of renovation or perhaps even a full interior gut, but there is no evidence in any of the exhibits that have been submitted by the owners that this home is structurally unsound. Throughout the process, demolition support letters claim that the landmark designation would limit the house to 3,000 square feet. This is not true. The home is currently over 4,500 square feet, excluding the garage. Landmarking a building does not dictate that existing square footage should be removed, nor does landmarking prevent square footage from being added. Letters supporting the demolition, many of the letters that have supported the demolition of this building, say that landmarking this building will bring about a minimum of $1 million in loss for the owners. First, there's no evidence to support that preserving the exterior portions of this home or even the landmarking process justifies these estimates. To accurately calculate these numbers, competitive market-based assessments would be required, and they have not been presented or submitted. The owners have listed the house for sale, stating that the property will be represented factually. However, we did hear back from a person who attempted several times to reach the realtor, finally got a call back. And then the interested buyer was told that 1, square footage for the house could not be increased, and 2, that modifications could not take place. These statements are just both untrue. In addition, we, the applicants, have repeatedly offered to withdraw our landmark application if the owners would simply retain the Montview Boulevard facing exterior and the Elm Street facing exterior walls along with the existing roof. And five, we saw here that only one letter of support was originally submitted, but we had our people submit letters to the Historical Society, and we received 27 letters that went to the Historic Denver in support of this. And then again, as you see, we have 4 registered RNOs, registered neighborhood organizations, and 3 separate notices of intent that really included 11 individual signatures. The other thing that we noticed with the owners' support letter was that many of them did not come from the Park Hill neighborhood. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague.
I don't have an answer for that.
You did not.
Okay.
You did not.
I don't really have an answer.
Nor have I.
So this is Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret.
Hello, and thank you commissioners for taking the time to be here and for the volunteer work that you do. First, I just wanted to say that historic preservation is not my background. This is the first time I've ever been involved in the landmarking process. And basically the reason that I chose or was motivated to act were the numerous concerns voiced by my neighbors and friends who lived in Park Hill, and I've lived there for decades. They strongly feel that the historic character of Park Hill is being lost at an accelerated pace. So I'm going to talk about one more misconception and then move on to the landmarking criteria, which we know is key here. In Exhibit E, a contractor writes that restoration work is typically twice as expensive as building new, and to force that on any owner seems unjust, unquote. The owner's lawyer follows this with, quote, mold, cracks, and other issues render the property uninhabitable, and a contractor has quoted a price of at least $2 to $3 million to remediate the issues without making any further improvements or any modern upgrades, unquote. Truth. A current and similar landmarked mansion renovation project by the same company that was quoted above is contracted to complete a move-in ready full renovation for close to $400 a square foot. This includes an entire interior gut, exterior window work, new systems, and high-end finishes. This would mean that potentially the 4,500 square foot of Montview could be move-in renovated for less than $2 million. In addition, any friable asbestos must be abated prior to demolition, yet might not need to be removed in rehabilitation. In conclusion, buildings like for like new is almost always more expensive than preservation. And in addition, new construction rates are rarely below $500 a square foot. That means to construct the owner's proposed 10,000 square foot home, it will cost a minimum of $5 million. So now I'd like to transition to the main reasons we're here today. And I see we're short on time as we stop, so I'll still keep trying to go quickly. So this historic Italian Renaissance revival home, built in 1933, has been a neighborhood icon for the past 90 years. It is an important example of the architectural style. This house also highlights variations within the Italian Renaissance revival style along Montview Boulevard. I'm going to move on now to criteria F, since landmark concurs criteria C is also valid. So this criteria F was accepted by the staff, but I just want to really clarify the importance of it. So Montview Boulevard is one of 16 parkways and 15 parks that received National Registry designation in 1986, and is called the Denver Park and Parkway System. This designation states that these elements, quote, are the foundation of the historic image of the city and of the quality of life which Denver citizens have enjoyed for over 100 years, unquote. To qualify, these historic parkways needed to retain the basic, quote, characteristics of design, construction, development, and use as were envisioned, unquote. Of these 16 parkways, Montview is the oldest, one of the oldest, and was promoted in 1889 as the up-and-coming boulevard in Denver. Our calculations show that of the 126 homes and public structures located along Montview, from Colorado to Monaco, only 6 of these are less than 70 years old. This means that currently, more than 95% of Montview still retains its historic integrity, and the loss of this prominent corner house would alter the integrity of the overall boulevard in a very meaningful way. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the disputed criteria B. According to landmark staff, quote, significant research is typically required for criteria B and D in order to establish that individuals have a substantial connection to a property as well as an influential role in the history of the city, state, and nation, unquote. Our application focused on detailing all the inhabitants of 5013 because the legacy and fame of Harry Huffman was previously confirmed by landmark staff when it was most recently used as a qualifying criterion to establish the Bluebird Theater as a Denver landmark in 1994. To quote word for word from this approved designation, quote, the Bluebird Theater was the original source of a small but significant thread in the history of the United States. It is a historic emblem of the man who came to be the dominant force in creating the popular culture of Denver during its most formative years, unquote. The application goes on to say that this is an emblem of the media empire of Harry Huffman. Therefore, we understood that the significance of Harry Huffman was already established and erroneously did not elaborate on this further in our landmark application. And it is important to note that over the course of Huffman's life, he owned 7 theaters, of which 3 are now Denver landmarks. Considering that his childhood house no longer stands, 5013 is one of the 3 remaining homes in which he resided and highlights a critical step along his rise to prominence. In July 1934, at the age of 51, Harry Huffman July 1933, at the age of 50, he became co-owner and manager of a newly formed corporation called General Theaters, Inc., which took over all the theaters in Denver. It was the first time, and I think the last, in which a local entity owned and managed all of its theaters. And then just 7 months after this remarkable career advancement, and actually 12 years after he purchased his first theater, the Bluebird, Harry Huffman and his wife moved from a 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow in a less affluent neighborhood onto the prominent Montview amongst the civic elite. This home was their socialite stepping stone and an announcement to Denver that the Huffmans had arrived as notable society. As the staff report suggests, it is also most likely that Christine Huffman and Mary Sugg knew each other. Records indicate that they traded the Montview house for the St. Paul bungalow as part of the purchase.
Margaret, yeah, that's 10 minutes right there.
Okay,
Sorry.
does it count though, since we had a 60-second or a
I
30
did pause
second?
your time, but it is, you as the chair can grant, but you may wanna also do that for the owner as well.
Sure,
To keep
sure,
it
I'll give you the
equitable.
60
Sorry,
seconds.
because there was the interruption or. else
I
we
did
have it.
pause the time.
Oh, you did, okay. So 13 was his lucky number, and in time their address would changed from 5003 to 5013 Montview, yet another indication of his significance. Harry Huffman personifies the beloved American dream. Born in a small town, he moved to the big city of Denver and transitioned through ingenuity and hard work from being the owner of a small drugstore to possessing a media empire in one of the liveliest US cities in his time. All because he recognized the lucrative connection between soda fountains and theaters. So our question is, if criteria B was a major factor in landmarking the Bluebird, why wouldn't criteria B also apply to his residence where he lived during a formative time in the establishment of his empire? Thank you for letting me continue.
Certainly, and for both of you, get your address.
Sure.
Sorry, Trish.
2050 Grape.
Okay. And Margaret,
2222 Locust,
and your last name, I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
Mick Roberts, MC Roberts.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for our applicants? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, now for the owners.
And in the interest of keeping things equitable, we'll allow you 11 minutes.
It's our presentation on it.
I'm pulling it up just now.
So you heard the routine. As you begin, start with your name and your address for our records. And then you'll,
And if you could wait till I have the timer. up.
between the 3 of you, you will have 11 minutes to make your presentation. As soon as she's queued up, you ready?
I'm ready when you are.
Can I ask one question? Do I have to tell you when to do the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'll read that so we have it clear.
All right, my name is Sarah Kellner and I'm an attorney for the Reinhardts here. I only am gonna speak very briefly before I'm gonna let them speak to you, but I feel compelled to just relate to you all. There were a couple comments made by the applicants about information submitted. There is an engineering report in what was submitted by the owners about the stability of the home. And I do want to remind the Landmark Commission that it is the burden of the applicants to satisfy all of these criteria. And so it is their burden to show that anything that they are claiming is untrue. They need to present that evidence to you. It's that they are satisfying those criteria. So with that, I'll let the Reinhardt speak.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Reinhardt. I'm one of the owners of 1513 Montview Boulevard. And I apologize, I do need to read from this. I'm a nurse by trade, and so this is not something that I'm used to doing. So I apologize. In August of 2022, you can go ahead and do the slide just for the timeline, sorry. Okay, in August of 2022, we were approached by a friend who is the daughter of a member of the McCarty family. It was listed before as McCarthy, it's actually McCarty. Family who was raised at 5013 Montview Boulevard. Aware of our love for Park Hill, she suggested that we look at the house to see if it might be something you were interested in purchasing. She mentioned that the home had been vacant for some time and it was in very rough shape. After visiting the house, we fell in love with the idea of living right across from our boys' school and our church. They would be able to walk to their classrooms in less than 5 minutes. Additionally, the move would bring us within 2 blocks of our closest friends. In September 2022, we purchased the house for $2.5 million from the McCarty family with plans to build our forever home. In January 2023, we hired architects and worked closely on our plans for the next 6 months. We were so excited. Our boys picked out which bedrooms they would have. I dreamt of cooking large meals for our friends and family. We could picture everything coming together. We felt incredibly blessed. We submitted plans to the city and quickly addressed the minimal comments we received. In August 2023, we submitted our demo application. Up to this point, no one at the city had ever mentioned our plans to be disrupted by landmark designation. In September 2023, we received the unexpected news that we had been flagged for possible landmark designation. We were completely blindsided, especially considering that we are not in a historic landmark district. We had no idea that this could happen, and I remember crying to Mark that evening. In October 2023, we began the facilitation process involving several neighbors, a mediator, and the representatives from both Historic Denver and the City of Denver. We anticipated discussions to be centered around historic designation criteria. Surprisingly, most of the concerns were related to the environmental impact of the project. Very little of the conversation had to do with historical significance. Throughout our meetings, it became apparent that the applicant's goal was to preserve the entire structure. In November 2023, we offered to put up the house for sale, targeting a preservation-minded buyer who would continue with the landmark designation process and restore the house with this existing structure. The house was listed at a price lower than the total amount we had invested throughout the entire process. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. As you can see, this is the marketing. It has received extensive marketing, likely surpassing that of any other home that's on the market in Colorado. Next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide. Sorry. It has been featured in prominent publications such as the Denver Post and Westword, and both Historic Denver and the applicants have actively promoted it. And if you want to go to the next 2 slides, you can see Westword, Denver Post, X, and then the next slide, please. This is from Historic Denver, and then next slide. And then this is from one of the applicants themselves. And next slide. Our own Park Hill Neighborhood Facebook post on November 22nd, 2023, announcing its availability for sale, had over 3,500 views in just one day. Next slide. As the house remains on the market, we find ourselves juggling 2 mortgages, adding unbelievable financial strain to our family. Next slide, please. It is honestly impossible to articulate just how terrible the experience has been. There have been lies written about the house as well as our family on social media. The emotional toll is overwhelming. We have been stuck in this process for months. We are not developers, but a family wanting to build our forever home in a neighborhood where we have lived for over 10 years. I am not embarrassed to say that I do not come from money. We have worked incredibly hard for our dream home and now face the very real threat of losing it. It is maddening that the situation has been influenced by a small group of individuals who hold the minority opinion that this house is a landmark without evidence and don't want to see the mold and lead contaminated contents go to a landfill. Thank you.
Next slide, please. And I'm Mark Reinhardt. As Mary Ann said, we love Park Hill, but not every house that was built 50 to 100 years ago fits the needs of a family today. It only takes a few minutes driving around the neighborhood to see the amount of new construction and also renovation projects. People in Park Hill value the ability to make changes to the inside and the outside of their home as they see fit. This sentiment was glaringly evident in 2015 when a small group attempted to designate Park Hill as a historic district and was met with immediate and widespread opposition. The neighborhood doesn't support this. That's why we were able to generate over 70 letters and counting of opposition against designation, the majority of whom are in fact in Park Hill. The applicant's main justification, next slide, please. The applicant's main justification for designating this home as a landmark is because it was briefly lived in by Harry Huffman. But the application simply does not provide sufficient evidence for why this home tells a significant story related to Huffman, who purchased the property on speculation and lived in it for a few years while he built Shangri-La, his forever home. He did not contribute in any way to its architecture. He did not add anything to the home, and there are no notable moments of historical significance that happened at the property. Simply put, Mr. Huffman left zero mark on the home. According to the applicant's own application, he was already profoundly successful by the time that he moved into this house. The slide. The applicants claim the property embodies the Italian Renaissance Revival style. You can go to the next slide, excuse me. Characteristics of which are up on the screen. However, the application acknowledges that the property's characteristics are simplified, not distinct, and they actually point to another address on Montview as a more ornate example of the architectural style it claims the property fits within. Slide. Here are a few examples of Italian Renaissance architecture from A Field Guide to American Houses by Virginia Savage McAllister. Slide. Next slide, please. Now, how does that compare to 5013 Montview? According to Denver architect John Gambrill, 5013 Montview has some awkward detailing that includes an accented window, an unadorned entry, and no overhangs at the roof. Slide. This is not a significant example of the Italian Renaissance Revival, but rather a spec home that didn't include an architect. There are far better examples of the Italian Renaissance Revival period within the Park Hill neighborhood. Slide. According to Travis Greiman, civil engineer, if you take away the roof, the house would be unremarkable in appearance and no other physical features would point toward a true Italian Renaissance Revival architectural style. Slide. Additionally, the application points to the fact that DM Sugg built the property as justification for landmark designation. Mr. Sugg, who is known to have built only 3 to 4 other houses in Denver, is not a recognized master builder, and the application doesn't even claim he is one. This property has no known architect, and the application fails to make any connection to the property, being a significant example of Sugg's work. Slide. DM Sugg was today's equivalent of a general contractor who built a spec home that echoed just enough of the design elements to resemble Italian Renaissance Revival in order to meet the 1930s market trend. Slide. The application claims that the property's location on Montview Boulevard alone, along with its age, satisfies this criterion. There are a lot of old houses on Montview, but that does not render them historic landmarks. These factors are simply not enough to warrant landmark designation. Slide. The most notable feature of the house is a clump of pine trees that we plan to keep. These trees were even noted by the applicants as a refuge for wildlife. You cannot see the house from the majority of the road on the Elm side or even the Montview side. And you can just kind of skip through the next slides while I'm talking. They're just pictures of the interior. So while I understand that the process does not look at the interior of the house, it's important to see that we're not trying to take down irreplaceable pieces of craftsmanship. We're removing asbestos, mold, lead paint, and other materials that are harmful. There's a few more, you can go ahead. Finally, we have the support of the people who are most intimately familiar with this property. Murray McCarty, who spent his childhood in the house as the son of the longest tenured owners, provided a support letter. Additionally, Joe Huff, whose family has owned the house next door since 1958, and where Joe still lives with his wife Cherry, is in favor of our plans. Slide. We have lived in Park Hill for over a decade. Our children's school, our church, and our friends are in Park Hill. We are not developers. We're not looking to flip the house for a profit. We're a family that wants to move forward with our forever home and contribute to the community. We ask you to agree with the staff report and deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Commissioners, have you any questions for our applicants? No? All right, great, thank you. All right, then we are on to the public comment period. Do you have a slide for public comment? So we'll do, should be live first.
Let's do, so we're gonna do in-person public comment, and if you're on participating online, we'll come to you second. So raise your hand, but we'll do in-person comment first.
Okay, yeah, so anyone who wishes to give a public comment, we don't have a sign up sheet, so you'll have to be polite. Take your turn, but you'll have 3 minutes to make your comment. And please begin as we did with the applicant and the owners. You need to give your name and address at the beginning. And please come and have a seat. Certainly.
Members of the commission. My name is Travis Greiman, Greiman, and I live at 22 Primary Street. I'm here today as an established Park Hill resident and as a practicing professional civil engineer licensed in Colorado, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. It's referenced a couple times on the slides previously here. Over 16 years, I've worked in both local government and private consulting firms doing performing development review, including time as a board engineer in Haddonfield, New Jersey, borough founded in 1713, with a very active historical preservation commission. From that professional context, I'm here today to provide a dissenting opinion that the house and the subject property satisfies criterion C, or that it embodies the distinctive visible characteristics, architectural style, type. The original application states that the style of the home is simplified Italian Renaissance revival, which we have heard. Simplified style is neither distinctive nor significant. The most prominent physical feature of the house, consistent with the Italian Renaissance revival style, is the terracotta roof. That's what you see first and foremost. Note that we do not see the other prominent physical features typically associated with the style, such as a strong division of floors, round top windows, balustrades, or deep articulated cornices. If the roof of the house was asphalt shingles, you would look at it and it would be rather unremarkable in appearance. And the combination of the other physical features, physical characteristics that have been highlighted in the application would not point you to an Italian Renaissance revival style or any distinct architectural style for that matter. The visible characteristics of the house reference Italian Renaissance revival, but they do not embody it in a significant way. The staff report recommends denial based on the lack of evidence for meeting criteria B and D. I'm here to propose that even if new evidence could support those criteria, the commission should also consider dissenting opinions regarding the lack of evidence for meeting criteria C as well. Simply put, this house does not warrant landmark preservation status. And I implore the commission to deny the application for landmark designation and put an end to the delay on the redevelopment of the property. Thank you.
Travis? Next. Anybody? There's no order. Come on up. So I recommended people be polite, but you know. Come on up. Your name and address, please.
I don't sound like an auctioneer. I have a lot of.
But you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Eric Stark, Rikstark, and I live at 2270 Birch Street in Park Hill. I'm a Park Hill and Denver native, and I've been in my present address for over 20 years. I'm speaking in favor of preservation and landmarking at 5013 Montview. My feelings about this go beyond the history, architecture, and location of the home. Is generally is the rationale for preservation I believe there are enough negative consequences endemic to all scrapes, and yet they seem to be completely absent from any discussion or consideration here by the commission or the owners. These include, as mentioned, the massive amounts of waste that go into landfills after scraping and all the original materials that get sent to the dump, including all the embodied energy that they have that took to manufacture, transport, construct, and maintain them. All of this is lost forever. Around 40% of landfills are construction waste, including demolitions. An average 2,000 foot square home can end up adding 300,000 pounds of waste to a landfill. The one on Montview is larger, of course. Where the landfills can handle this, the climate can't, and the amount of greenhouse gases released in the entire process of scraping and rebuilding from scratch are huge. Another consequence is the big increase in impervious ground cover. After a scrape, more of the land is covered in the rebuild. This increases drainage and flooding issues as storms can dump inches of water now in a few hours, as we now see in Denver. Park Hill is not immune, and several areas have had damaging flooding, including nearby 16th Avenue south of Montview. This leads to expensive and intensive water projects like Platte to Park Hill to try to deal with all these flows. Larger footprints and less green space also add to the city's heat island effect, which has grown dramatically in Denver, not only because of climate change, but with the massive construction and densification of central Denver, without a corresponding increase in green space and parks. Another consequence is the increased housing costs for a community. Scrapes incrementally increase the cost of housing by always putting up a more expensive home than what was there. And we all agree 5013 could hardly be considered affordable by the average American, but what goes in there will be even less so. Park Hill used to be a place where families could find affordable starter homes. Now it's jokingly called the place where only Park Hillionaires can live by. At a time when the lack of affordable housing is a growing issue for a growing number of Americans, scrapes shrunk this off and built something a smaller and smaller percentage of Americans can ever afford. To me, what this all comes down to is a value system, and it goes like this. The new owners want to have a new home with all the bells and whistles, square footage, amenities that a new home provides, but they want to live in a cool old neighborhood. Never mind, they have to remove some of that cool old neighborhood to do this. That's not even on the radar. They have the desire, the property right, and the money to do so. But I don't think these are the only considerations that matter, even if it doesn't have enough historical criteria. Nothing about scrapes is sustainable for our future. The consequences of massive waste, increased flooding and heat island effect, and the accelerating loss of affordable housing are real and growing. I feel ignoring this takes us in the exact wrong direction from where we need to be going as a
Eric?
community.
Yeah, your 3 minutes is up.
All right.
Thank you very
for
much, sir.
Considering all of this in your decision.
Of course, thank you.
All right.
All right, next, and I know that, yeah, I know there's somebody ready. Yeah, come on up. Name and address, please. You can start.
Good afternoon. My name is Evan Lee. I live at 1725 Albion Street. I live in Park Hill. Have lived at that address for more than 10 years. I'm also currently the owner and then doing a renovation of a house at 1980 Glencoe Street, which is immediately across the street, several blocks down from 5013 Montview. I have lived in Park Hill for more than 10 years. My children were born at Rose Hospital, have grown up in Park Hill. My wife and I have attended church at Montview Presbyterian, several blocks down from 5013 Elm Street for more than a decade. I've had 2 dogs that have since passed. I have a 3rd dog now. Suffice it to say, with my children going to school, the dogs walking, going to church, I have walked up and down Montview countless times in the 12 years that I have lived at 1725 Albion. In that time period, I can state very plainly that the house at 5013 Montview has not been a prominent aspect of my experience. Prior to this particular process, I'm not sure I ever could have picked it out because amongst a row of beautiful houses along Montview, it is a decrepit house that is blocked almost entirely by large trees. I had sat down here thinking that I was going to focus primarily on the criteria F, and I believe I am doing so, but I want to ground it in my personal experience, which is that in walking around Montview over the last 10 years, this house, I do not believe, satisfies criteria F as a prominent feature along Montview Boulevard. And as somebody who currently lives in Park Hill and is renovating a house in Park Hill, I have deep concerns about the precedent that will be set by designating this particular house under these particular circumstances as a landmark or as historic, because I do believe it will open the proverbial floodgates to every house along Montview and perhaps every single house in Park Hill being subject to the very same process that the Reinhardts are going through here. I do not believe that is the purpose of landmark designation. I believe that we are witnessing a circumstance that is an unintended consequence of an otherwise well-intentioned process of preserving very significant pieces of the city's history. But if this house is historic, and I don't see how all of Park Hill cannot be deemed historic, and as Mr. Reinhardt previously mentioned, there was an effort in 2015 to create a landmark district, preservation district in Park Hill that met fierce opposition from the neighborhood. I do not believe that Park Hill supports either a broader designation nor designation of this particular house. And I believe that approving this application will essentially operate as a backdoor way of creating a landmark district that is not supported by the community.
Thanks, Linda. All right, next, please. I'll get you after you. I'm gonna address it.
Hi, my name is John Deffenbaugh. Our address is 1420 Walton Street, and I'm CEO of Historic Denver. Since joining the organization back in May last year, I have said many times to many people that an owner-opposed designation is the last resort once all else fails. That is why we're here, and that is why the designation application was written in 48 hours, because the applicants were hopeful until the last moment that a compromise may be reached. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Historic Denver is an organization that strives to empower people to actively experience and thoughtfully maintain our city's cultural landmarks and historic places today and into the future. 5013 Montview is one of those original historic places amongst many others on Montview Boulevard, one of our city's most historic streets. Numerous treasures work together to tell the cohesive story of Park Hill and Denver. Each of these buildings is part of a whole, and losing one impacts the historic character of the neighborhood and boulevard. Denver continually faces pressure which results in demolition. Every day, we're in danger of losing critical components that represent our history. Demolishing these structures does not add to our heritage, it detracts from it. The applicants here today are aware of that and of the increasing pressure from demolition on the historic nature of their community. Historic assets like Montview Boulevard are what keep Denver, Denver. The more we lose, the more we are at risk of losing the unique identity of our city. We're not here today for a fight nor a battle, but as part of a democratic process that exists to sense check the demolition of significant structures that might otherwise fall through the cracks, and to give the wider community a voice in the fate of the buildings that shape the character of the neighborhood around them. The building was flagged as meeting 4 landmark criteria, and the community responded. 3 notices of intent were submitted, unprecedented from what we understand. 30 individuals reached out to Historic Denver to express concern over the loss of the house, albeit outside this public process. $900 was raised over a weekend to cover the landmark designation fee, and hundreds of people engaged in likes and hearts on social media posts with regard to the house. This is not an insignificant structure to the neighborhood, and discussion is certainly warranted on path forward. We hope the Commission will consider the greater context of Park Hill and how much losing even one structure can harm the rich heritage of our city, its neighborhoods, and their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ma'am.
I do not have prepared remarks.
That's okay. You've got 3 minutes. Let's start.
I live at 6235 Montview. My name is Liz Cameron. I am a 40-year resident of Park Hill. When I moved to Park Hill, most of the people here wouldn't have moved in. So I got married, moved out, but I dragged my husband back in. We looked at so many houses, he could only live in one. All the pictures we had, falling in ceilings, no walls in our basement. My cement floor in the basement is still dust. We have the toilet coming through. We had to build arches. The fireplace was out. Every light fixture was gone. We went through room by room by room. This is because we both worked and we didn't have enough money to tear it down or build or whatever. So we just went room by room by room, and we found that restoration is cheaper, or it can be done. It's called work, it can be done, restoration. I have many books on restoration. I have been a fan of restoration for 48 years. I'm not a fan of renovation. I'm a fan of restoration, which is why I lived in a 1937 Tudor house. And by the way, I would have lived in Wash Park, but it was, you know, like a couple $1,000s more expensive. Couldn't do it. So when I bought my Park Hill home, I had to go to Park Hill. So I couldn't do Wash Park like all my friends or whatever, you know, the little boomers that were coming here with John Denver and stuff. So I don't have any smart remarks or anything, but I will tell you that restoration is possible. The other thing I do want to say, and this is a big concern of mine, whenever I see a scrape in Mayfair or whatever the heck, Congress Park, it's always they're saying they're building green, okay? If you are heating and cooling a 5,000-foot home, it is versus heating and cooling a 4,000-foot home. That ain't green, folks. I'm really good at arithmetic, and that is not green, okay? And throwing stuff in a landfill, as the gentleman pointed out, is not green. So when you're looking at these footprints, in Denver, actually Denver City has a big problem with this because all the new buildings go right up to the sidewalk and there's no room for tree lawns or benches or fountains or trees or bushes, anything for people to relax and become calm. Trees and large or smaller homes on a larger lot make people calm. The third thing I want to point out is I have walked a lot in Park Hill over 40 years. I'm slightly disabled now, so I can't walk around anymore, but I did notice the house. I have noticed the house. You can see the house from the street. That's all I have to say. I'm no expert on anything, but I do know how to restore.
Liz, thank you very much. All right, next. Hi.
Hello.
Name and address first, please.
My name is Brian Rosberg, ROSSBEID, and I live at 2605 Glencoe Street. Good afternoon, Landmark Preservation Commission. My name is Brian Rosberg. I'm a resident of Park Hill, and I oppose the landmark designation of 5013 East Montview Boulevard. As you can tell by my address, I live about 8 blocks away from this property, and it's on the way for school for my oldest in the last couple of years. My wife and I have lived in Park Hill for 10.5 years, and we've passed by this house many times, never have really noted it except for the condition of the property itself. In my research and having read through the staff report to the commission, I believe that this property actually meets none of the criteria for landmark designation, even though initially considered by staff when the demolition permit was first sought. There are a number of reasons why I think this is true. I will not go into the details of all of the reasons the property does not meet criteria, but I would like to highlight the lack of any real evidence that 5013 East Montview doesn't satisfy criteria C or F. When this designation was first sought after, the first thing I did was to look up Italian Renaissance Revival to see examples of this type of architectural style and to compare it with the property in question. I think Mr. Reinhardt showed some very interesting examples compared to the property in question. Besides the roof and some flourishes here and there, the house is rather plain and does not compare to the examples of the style I found online. I recognize that I'm not an expert when it comes to this sort of thing, but my layman's eye finds that this particular structure lacking if compared to other examples of Renaissance Revival style, and thus does not meet criteria C, that it embody the distinctive visible characteristics of an architectural style or type. That's from the criteria of the commission. More than not really reflecting the style it purports, that proponents purported to be a shining example of, 5013 Montview does not meet criteria F. That is, it does not represent an established and familiar feature of the neighborhood, community, or contemporary city due to its prominent location or physical characteristics. The structure on this property is not distinctive by any stretch of the imagination, even in its heyday. The structure is in utter disrepair and to my understanding has sat vacant for a number of years. It is certainly not a structure that defines the neighborhood aesthetic, quite the opposite. I would say that Tudors and bungalows actually define the neighborhood aesthetic in Park Hill. One more note regarding criteria B and D. Proponents have argued that Mr. Huffman, who resided in the dwelling for a very short span of time, and Mr. Sugg, who built the abode, are recognizable figures in Denver history. To those proponents, I say,
I'm sorry,
now?
your
Okay.
time's up.
all right,
I'm so sorry.
no, it's all right.
Thank you, though. Alrighty, next. Does anybody else want to give another public comment? All right.
We'll
Just-
move on to online and
Thank you.
we do have 11 people who have raised their hand online. So we do have a list and we'll go in order of what your hand was raised and the chair will call on you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Brittany. All right, Karen? Yeah.
There we go. I was looking for the unmute button. Thank you very much. This is Karen Gerlide. Just to clarify that in case there's more than one Karen on the list.
Yes, you are first, Karen.
Okay, great. Thank you. I live at 2390 Dexter Street. And, you know, I think what I share with my Park Hill neighbors is a love of the neighborhood, a love of our history, and a love of preservation and restoration when it is impactful and when it's feasible. You know, we love Montview Boulevard. I walk my dog, who I'm hoping will not bark during my comments, and I walk it every day. And you know, I know that there are a majority of the homes on Montview are beautiful. They're older. They had prominent residents at one time or currently. However, that does not meet the criteria of a historic home. You know, I'm in support of the Reinhardt family. I oppose the landmark designation. I don't know the Reinhardt family up until this situation, but I believe very strongly that if we are to impose potentially life-changing financial, emotional, and other requirements and restrictions on a family and on our neighbors who live here, that we need to be very thoughtful in the process and we need to abide by the criteria and not by our own personal feelings about other renovations, other restorations, other development that we don't like, or of development as a whole that we don't like. We have people who are putting their entire life on the line for this opportunity to build their forever home. I dispute criteria B has been set. I would dispute that this is a prominent location. You know, and I would say that, you know, historic Denver did not meet the criteria. That is very clear. The Reinhardt family has done everything right, and they have been doing so under unbelievable pressure and financial strain. So my closing comment is that please, if private citizens and this commission want to impose constraints on private property purchased without restriction and dictate how a family must spend their life savings, then the burden of proof is on that criteria. It must be clearly met and it must be compelling. And that is not the case, in my opinion, in this circumstance. So
Karen,
thank you.
Yeah, your time is up. Thank you very much, Karen. Next is Jennifer Lackey.
Sorry.
That's okay. Jennifer?
Yes, hi. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
We can. Please start with your name and your address.
Sure, I'm gonna apologize first. I have the flu. So
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
my name is Jennifer Lackey. My address is 3008 Gaylord Street.
Okay.
And I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Clearly, it's important to me since I'm calling in while I'm sick. But what I want to share first and foremost is just some background history. I am a third generation Coloradan. I currently live in the Whittier neighborhood in a 1907 home, and my daughter attends school in Park Hill, where she has for over 10 years. My grandparents lived in the Park Hill community. So the historic nature of all of these communities are incredibly important to me. I'm actually a donor to Historic Denver. I care very much about historic preservation. And in this particular case, I don't think that historic preservation should win over the homeowners. I was really thrilled to hear the decision that the staff has come to that this doesn't meet historic designation. And I would happen to agree. I think in particular, it's compelling that Park Hill has elected not to become a neighborhood that has historic designation. And I think respecting the views and opinions of the neighborhood are really critical in this case. I can also share that I know Mark and Marianne Reinhardt are upstanding community members. They give to the community, to the church they go to the school. They've made a huge impact in the community. I know they're looking to make this property better than what currently exists there. And so I have the support of them moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, and hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Sure, Jason Kaplan.
I don't know that one.
There's a lot she doesn't know today.
All right, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, Jason Kaplan, 4130 Montview Boulevard. And I think, it's pretty cut and dry. Staff already recommended that this should not be a landmark designation. I agree with them completely on many of their points. Walking up and down, Montview, I would just say instead of it being an icon, it's just been an eyesore. And I would say that a lot of the Italian Renaissance components just don't exist on this property. And you can see that there was an addition, it's falling apart. I think it's pretty cut and dry. And I think for a landmark designation to be appointed here, it would basically be a crime. So I'll just keep it short and sweet, and hopefully everybody makes the right decision here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Next is Sherry Jacobs.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please give us your address, please, before you begin.
Sure. So I'm Sherry Jacobs. I live at 2037 Cremeria Street in Park Hill. My great aunt and uncle lived in Denver in the 1800s. Actually, their name and their story is in a Denver historic book that you can get at Walgreens. So we've lived in Denver a long time, moved away and came back. And I moved to Park Hill because I love the homes there. And I respect the work that this commission has done and that this is a community-driven process. And I believe the process has been done. And I agree with the determination that it doesn't meet the criteria. And I strongly believe in that we protect the environment and that we look at historic buildings. So I looked at all the criteria that was evaluated, and it's clear to me that the house meeting only 2 of the 10 criteria that was stated earlier in this meeting means it just simply doesn't meet the landmark designation status. Furthermore, I just think that when we establish that criteria, the result of this hearing right now is going to impact every other resident as they think about any renovations they may need to be done to their house if that landmark status can be given without meeting the criteria. So I think that it's really important that we adhere to the criteria that has been established, and that since landmark status should not be given to this home, that I urge you to consider my perspective as a local resident and deny the request for landmark designation. I don't think it meets the criteria. And I think that families like the Reinhardt should be able to build that dream home that they want to build based on the criteria that's been established in that evaluation.
All right, Sherry, thank you very much. Mallory Pyle is next. Hi,
Okay.
Mallory.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
I can. Your address, please.
Okay, perfect. I am just here in support of Mark and Mary Ann. I was so excited when I heard that they bought a new house and that they were deciding to renovate or rebuild. And they told me that it was on Montview, and I was so excited. I'm like, oh, I probably know what it is. You know, lived in the neighborhood for some time. I live, you know, just down the road on Cremeria Street. And so I was like, I probably know it. And they're like, yeah, they gave us the address, and I drove by multiple times before I actually noticed the house, because so many of the other bigger, I want to say more beautiful houses stood out first, or the library or the Masonic Temple, the churches on the either side. So I was really surprised when one of the criteria, F, that it was a recognizable feature of the neighborhood, was one that the Landmark Association said that it met, because I just don't believe that to be true. I agree that the trees, the big pine trees in the corner of the lot, are, you know, disrupting some of the views, so people can't really even see the house. The trees are maybe more recognizable. So I think that some of the other points about that other people have brought up about the design of the house haven't really been met either. And so I'm just here in support of Mark and Mary Ann. Thank you.
Mallory, can you give us your address, please, before you leave?
Yeah, my address is 2045 Cremeria.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Shannon. Shannon, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
We can. Can you please start with your name and address?
Yes, Shannon Speziali. And my address is 2346 Hudson Street.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I am a resident of Park Hill as well. I drive by this eyesore of a home, as well as all the other beautiful homes on Montview on a daily basis. As a Park Hill resident, I agree with the owners that this house is not worth saving because of the current condition due to it being vacant for years, as well as the style of the home. I disagree with the statement by the applicants that this home embodies the distinctive character of this neighborhood. Historical Park Hill homes include the classic Tudor, craftsman style bungalows, Queen Anne Victorians, and Denver squares. There is nothing about this house that represents Park Hill or Denver history. I have lived in Park Hill for over 7 years, and myself, as well as the majority of my neighbors, would have never purchased a home in this neighborhood if it were previously established as a historic landmark district. What these current property owners are going through to build their forever home is an infringement on their rights as a homeowner. If this home really embodied all the distinctive characteristics of the neighborhood and should be deemed historical, where were these 3 Denver residents that say they are representing their Park Hill friends and neighbors the last several years? Where were they prior to the home changing ownership, as the home has sat vacant and has deteriorated to a condition beyond repair? I strongly support the Reinhardt family and strongly oppose the preservation of this home for landmark designation. I appreciate your time.
Great, thank you, Shannon.
Thanks.
Audrey Sandusky.
And Audrey, you're on 2 devices. If you could lower your hand on the one you're not using to speak, that would be helpful so we could get you unmuted correctly.
Sorry, I was told.
That's okay.
Okay. Hi, my name is Audrey Sandusky. I live at 2541 Eudora Street.
Great, thank you.
On the Montview property. I oppose the landmark designation because the features of this now dilapidated and vacant property are not what I consider familiar to the neighborhood. I run by this neighborhood, by this property all the time. It's actually A lot of people have been tossing around the word eyesore. It's an eyesore, and use any other adjective to describe the afterthought that the home is at this point in its current state. It's in need of a family like the Reinhardts to re-envision it. I don't think this effort to preserve what is left of the property is what makes Park Hill special. I also don't believe the antagonism by which this effort is fueled is a characteristic of Park Hill. But what I love about Park Hill is our ability to elevate and celebrate our unique styles and expression. That's apparent when you drive around. There are no two homes the same in our neighborhood. They are all unique and tell a part of each neighbor's story. That's what makes Park Hill special. This effort runs counter to that value. As a resident of Park Hill, I believe the Reinhardts should have full autonomy to make a house a home, and this landmark preservation holds them back from that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Next is Sean Janelle. Sean?
Good afternoon.
Yeah, hi. Name and address before you start, please.
Absolutely. Sean Janelle, 2022 Hudson Street.
Thank you.
I'm here to oppose the landmark designation, but advocate for the preservation of the fabric that has made Park Hill one of the best neighborhoods in the country. We have lived in Park Hill for over 10 years. Some of you might have seen an article written in January 2020 of the Greater Park Hill newspaper about a boy who had cancer and whose neighbors rallied around him. That was our son, and that was written by me. We met the Reinhardts when they donated to our son when we didn't even know them. They bought the house at 5013 Montview in good faith to stay in Park Hill and build their forever home. It was based on a agreed price by the family of 10 siblings, but then they were handcuffed by this group. The house was a mere stepping stone for Harry Huffman from 1933 to 1935 before they started building the Shangri-La mansion. The words are that it has to have a direct and substantial association with a recognized person. While the applicant spent much time saying how Harry Huffman was a recognized person, and no one disputes that. But a substantial association for someone that bought it and moved into a new house within a couple years to build the Shangri-La mansion doesn't seem like it's direct and substantial to me. The Park Hill Promise book, 600 pages, has a history of Park Hill, mentions Harry Huffman 3 times. 1, his architect that built Shangri-La was from Park Hill. 2, that he was going to build a store at Cremeria and Colfax. And 3, that his brother built a house on Fairfax. Not one time was he mentioned at 5013 Montview. It's a scary precedent to dissuade people from moving to Park Hill by having opposition when you already buy a home. If we want to proactively work with homeowners to opt in, that would be great. But we shouldn't handcuff people who've bought their home. Do we have the burden of proof that these items should designate it as a historical landmark? It's far-reaching at best. 20 letters from the community and 2 letters from neighborhoods after the deadline? Where was the due diligence beforehand? It seems like people just want to oppose the Reinhardts just to oppose them and not really substantiate their claims. The real preservation needs to encourage multi-generation Park Hill residents working with groups who want to proactively work with the community and not handcuff them to build their forever home. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Right on 3 minutes. Well done. Scott Holder is next. Hello, Scott?
Sorry.
Oh, you're okay. I'm here talking to a wall.
Okay.
Hi,
Can you hear me
Scott.
now?
Yeah,
Okay.
your name and address, please.
Okay, I'm Scott Holder and I live at 2315 North Williams. I speak today in support of landmarking the house at 5013 East Montview. Harry Huffman's story should have been granted more weight in the application. It's unfortunate that most of his stature as an entertainment mogul for much of Denver's 20th century has been overlooked in the process today. That isn't to say he's been overlooked in past landmark applications, far from it. His construction of noteworthy venues like the Aladdin Theater should also include the fact that it was the 4th theater in the world when in February 1927 it introduced talkies to Denver, Huffman having signed the first contract with Vitaphone. One of the buildings he leased beginning in 1930 was the Tabor Opera House. To quote the Denver Post from 1930, the Tabor, under the guidance of Harry Huffman, has been transferred from an ordinary nondescript playhouse into a completely new fine theater. His efforts prolong the life of places like the Tabor. His theaters were a ubiquitous presence throughout Denver, and his free Christmas shows for kids were some of the biggest draws in the city during the Great Depression, which coincides with his residence in the house. The following is quoted from another landmark application which used Huffman as one of its criteria. Quote, Huffman became one of the most powerful single voices in the development of entertainment and culture in Denver's formative years. His personality and taste left a wide footprint, not only on some of Denver's visible architecture, but on the tone and character of its popular entertainment from the 1920s to the 1960s, unquote. That is contained in the Bluebird Theater's application for both Denver landmark status in 94 and National Register status in 96. Both applications singled out Huffman under significance, specifically Criteria B, and I quote, the theater is eligible under Criteria B for its association with premier movie theater owner and promoter Harry Huffman. Huffman acquired the Bluebird to begin the city's first and largest locally owned chain of movie theaters, unquote. The Denver landmark application reads, the historical importance of the structure is identified with a person or group of persons who had some influence on society, unquote, and then specifies Harry Huffman. Given that both of these applications acknowledged Huffman's significance as part of the criteria for granting landmark and National Register status, the same should apply in this case. That would then meet the minimum 3 criteria needed for landmark consideration. I ask the commissioners to approve the application in light of Huffman's acknowledged importance in at least one previous Denver landmark process. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. All right, next is Jeffrey Sweezy.
Whoa. What did it start with?
Did I not read properly?
No, you did. Not sure. He disappeared.
Oh, he disappeared?
Oh.
There you are. Yes, name and address, please.
Jeffrey Sweezy, 3407 Boston Street.
Okay.
And I'm here today to object the designation of landmark status. As I listened to the presentation today in the criteria that was laid out, I did not disagree with the Huffman and Sugg individuals in their lack of importance or historical tying to the property. However, when at the end it was mentioned that C and F were the 2 criteria that were met, I was genuinely very surprised, as those were 2 that I had actually noted as some of the weakest criteria in my opinion. When it comes to criteria C in the style, I think most people, as you look at that house, can see that it is just a cheap imitation of Italian Renaissance, almost lipstick that was put on later. But more importantly, criteria F being a familiar and prominent house on Montview Boulevard, I would disagree with. Myself and my 2 daughters drive Montview Boulevard every day to drop them off at Blessed Sacrament School, which anyone familiar with the neighborhood knows it is a stone's throw from that house. Furthermore, when we drive west on Montview Boulevard every day, we look out the right-hand window, so we look north at the sidewalk to see if we can catch their friends walking to school. So we specifically scout that sidewalk, the whole boulevard, until we get to Blessed Sacrament, looking basically at every single house as we pass. When I found out about the process in the Reinhardt's buying that house, I had never any recollection of seeing that house or it being of any prominent figure. We park on the corner of Eudora every morning for drop-off, which is the next corner up from the house. And we cross at that crosswalk, which is right at that corner. And again, I can say that I have never actually noticed that house until this process and it was brought to my attention. So in my opinion, prominent means something you would recognize and could draw from memory instantly. And that was never something that I think met that criteria. So again, I'm here to speak against the designation in terms of those standards. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeffrey. Next is Rachel Greiman.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Please give us your address and you can begin.
Great. My name is Rachel Greiman and I live at 2052 Cromeria Street, and I wholeheartedly oppose the designation of 5013 Montview as a historic property. I specifically wanted to speak to criteria F. It says that the property has to be a distinctive or established piece of the Park Hill neighborhood. And the only thing established about the property is that it's in disrepair, because we've heard this over and over again at this point from many people. I've lived in this neighborhood for more than a decade, and I've talked about this situation often over the last 6 months with other people and friends who live in Park Hill. When I try to explain the circumstance about what's happening to other Park Hill friends, the only way to orient them to the address is to say that I'm talking about the really rundown house on the corner of Elm and Montview. They immediately know which house I'm talking about when I reference it that way. I understand we're not discussing the physical state of the home, but if you decide that you want to designate this as a historic property, an individual family cannot take that on, nor could any private citizen that I know in this neighborhood. The cost is astronomical to do that. Practically, who does Historic Denver expect to finance the preservation of this home if we do landmark it? Practically, who do they expect to finance the preservation of any other private homes they decide should have this designation in the future? I believe, and I think most of the people sitting in that room do, that preservation and restoration of the history in our city is really important. But this feels like Historic Denver wants to make a point with this specific property. It feels unjust to let a very small minority of people in this community dictate what other residents do with the property that they have legally purchased. It feels like they are trying to make an example of this home, posturing the kind of leverage or control they could have over personal property. Like Mr. Lee mentioned earlier, this could set a dangerous precedent going forward for Park Hill as far as landmark designation, and it will make families significantly more reticent to move here if they buy a home with the intention to build a dream home, and then they find out later in the process that they can't. Because I have a minute left, I also wanted to talk about Harry Huffman. No one is disputing that he was an important figure in Denver. That has been made abundantly clear just by his theaters being landmarked in the past. But his work has nothing to do with that property. His work has everything to do with the theaters who are historic. And it's just such a tangential connection to make. And I think it's really unfair that it was even being considered.
All right, Rachel, thank you very much. Next is Kelly Shearer. Kelly? Hello, Kelly?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Name and address before you begin, and then you've got 3 minutes, please.
Oh, good. My name is Kelly Shear. I'm at 8189 East 28th Place in Central Park neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I am just chiming in a little bit from a personal standpoint. So I'm not sure if any of my other family members are on the call, but Anne and Alston McCarty were my grandparents. And I was part of the sale for this to Mark and Marianne, as they are personal friends of ours, the Blessed Sacrament, and our children are close friends, and Marianne and I are close friends. This is a tricky one for me, right? Because I grew up in this home. I had a lot of memories of my childhood in this home. However, I do not believe that this is a historic landmark and that this should be overreached from the city of Denver into this private family's personal situation. They have constructed design plans in full representation of the history and the preservation of the Park Hill neighborhood, and is their full intention of preserving that in their new design construction. I have been inside this home. I created memories inside this home, and as treasured as it is to me and my family, there is nothing historic about this home. And so I just wanted to chime in from a personal standpoint in support of Mark and Marianne that this is not designated as a historic landmark.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much. Next is Alexandra.
Hello.
Hello, hi. Yeah, please give your name and address before you begin.
My name is Alex Musenfector, or Alexandra.
Okay.
I'm at 2833 Spruce Street.
Great, thank you.
Of course. So I'm a friend of the Reinhardts, and while not a resident of Park Hill, I mean, I think it should be made clear that this is not a Park Hill specific issue. By stepping away from the stringent standards that are set forth in the Landmark Preservation Ordinance, this would impact Denver as a whole and not just the Park Hill neighborhood. So I think any letter sent in should be given equal weight. And I don't have too much to add, except from highlighting that in enacting the Landmark Preservation Ordinance, the city really recognized that a historic designation should not be taken lightly. The ordinance makes it clear that to be designated as historic, the structure has to reflect outstanding elements of the city's heritage. And that's why the ordinance sets forth these specific criteria, and the criteria that, as we've clearly seen today, have not been met in this case. And that includes the lack of substantial ties between Mr. Hoffman and the house. Its influence on society, like it was just stated, is not argued here. But, and as was outlined in the findings, it's clear that his few years in a spec house while building his eventual forever home does not amount to a substantial association with a recognized person. And again, you know, as a Denver resident and a friend of the Reinhardts who's been following these proceedings, the strict language in the ordinance is what brings me some solace, because it assures that an innocent homeowner, just as in this case, will not be deprived of his property rights by some vague ties to Denver's heritage. And another concern here is that this house sat empty, slowly deteriorating for years. The ordinance states that once a structure is designated as historic, it shall be preserved against decay and deterioration and kept free from structural defects by the owners thereof. So it's just begs the question as to why, you know, if the proponents really wanted to preserve this home and designate it as historic, you know, assuming it actually met the criteria, you know, why wasn't an application been brought forward when it first started deteriorating years ago? I guess, and just my hope really, the city upholds the stringent standards in designating a home as historic and not set forth a precedence that's going to limit private property owners' rights by loosening the requirements that we've outlined today to designate a private home as historic. That's all.
Great. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Alex. One last comment, Krista Lee. Hi, Krista? Krista?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please start with
Okay.
your name and address.
Yes, my name is Krista Lee. I live at 1725 Albion Street. I've been a resident of Park Hill for 15 years. And in those 15 years, well, I'd actually never noticed the home until Mark and Marianne told me that they had purchased it. I had to drive past it multiple times to even recognize it. It was covered by a tree. So obviously no one could even see the home until this unhealthy tree was removed. It was obviously uninhabited for a long time. The outdoor property was in poor condition. When I had the opportunity to tour the inside and see the interior of the home, it was even worse. Nothing in the home was original, and I could only imagine the scope of work that would need to happen in order to get it up to code. On a personal note, we're in the process of renovating a home at Montview and Glencoe, and we've been absolutely shocked by the cost of renovations. Our home is in much better condition than 5013 Montview, and we're still going to end up putting over $1 million into renovating it. We're never going to recover this investment. Granted, this was our choice, but we need to recognize that this is not feasible for other families. It's unfair for 3 individuals to pay a small sum of money and to submit a landmark application against the owner's wishes. You know, the Reinhardts are not a development company that are looking to split the lot and make profit. They're looking to invest in our neighborhood so that we can all enjoy it.
Oh, is that all, Krista?
That's it.
That's it? Great. Krista, thank you so much. There's nobody else online. Anybody else here that hasn't already give you one last chance to speak? Nope. Okay, great. So then do I close the public hearing? Okay, I hereby close the public hearing at 10 till 3. So, with the staff, any redirect from the staff, any?
I'll just do a reminder that what is under review today is just what's in the application. I know there was some additional information provided in some of the testimony and comments, but we can only, our purview as Landmark is just to review, for you to review what's in the application.
Right, and
could I ask Abby to make
Of course.
clarification?
Sure.
Because I'm not sure if it was clear in the process. And that is what happens after, what happens, should this commission vote to,
Right, yes, thank you. I should have
Can you just
clarified
make that
that.
clear?
So yes, so if the commission, basically, if you vote today to deny the application, that is the end of the application. And the demolition permit, and landmark approval for demolition will be issued. If you decide you can recommend approval, and if you recommend approval of the application, then the application will be forwarded to city council and they will have the final decision.
exactly, thank you. I just thought it was.
Yes, thank you very much, Anne.
Yeah, so, all right, then, any other questions for Abby, Steph? Okay, great. All right, commissioners, let us go into deliberation, and remember, as Abby said, we take the emotion out of it, and we heard a lot of comments. This is about the application, it's in the application. Does this meet the criteria? Oh, yeah. No, mine just felt a little. I felt like I was kind of on the Titanic over here. Great, thank you very much. So, what are your thoughts, commissioners? Our purview is pretty clear. Does it meet the criteria?
I can start.
Nick, sure.
I appreciate all of the public input and feedback and effort that has been put in at both sides of this discussion. But to me, and I'm anxious to hear what my colleagues have to say, I feel that I'm in full support of the staff's recommendation in this case. It is clear to me that given the information in the application, that the connection to the historically significant individual in Denver is not really that strong. And I do buy the argument that it was a temporary housing situation for him while he was looking to other things. And for those reasons, I support staff.
Nick, thank you. Anybody else? Erica?
First, I would like to echo Nick's thoughts on it's important that we heard from everyone today, including the multiple letters that we've received. I want to thank the applicants for taking the time and kind of putting your necks out there. I know this, there have been characterizations that I don't think, was your intention. I think you're looking to do what you think is right for the Park Hill neighborhood. And I want to thank the homeowners for your patience through this process. I know it's clearly heart-wrenching to you, and I apologize that that's the case. I do think, though, this process is important, and I think everyone here has not taken this on lightly. So I just want to kind of lay that out there, that none of this is a personal vendetta. And I think that's very clear to us on the commission. Regarding the criteria, which is our purview, I also agree with the staff's report. I think there is certainly some potential for Huffman to be a prominent person within Denver's history. His substantial association with the property still remains unclear to me. I also will say that as far as criterion F goes, there's been a lot of talk about that criterion. I think some further analysis, just like under criterion C, that points out what exactly, other than it's been there for a long time on this prominent parkway, what kind of makes it stand out from other neighboring houses. Otherwise, we do kind of find ourselves in a situation of each house being potentially significant under criterion F. However, I would like to stress that I do think this is a loss to have this house potentially be demolished. I think, you know, the sentiment of what attracts people to this neighborhood is getting chipped away at. We've seen that in a few other applications to us. And I think it's, I will also point out that while I understand that there isn't that local support for local designation, this is a historic district for the National Register. So it is recognized as a historic district. And I think by slowly losing these buildings, we're chipping away at that historic district that already exists. So that's, in the end, I think I would vote against the designation, but you know, seriously considering all sides of the issue. Thank you.
Erica, thank you.
Very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry or Aaron?
I don't really have anything additional to say. I, you know, agree with my fellow commissioners and, you know, appreciate the community effort that went into this, because I know it's hard and we've been through this with several other properties over the last year. And I think it's hard for everybody in Denver, these conversations, but I do agree with staff's recommendation to deny this application for the reasons given out by staff and my fellow commissioners, and I support that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also agree with the other commissioners in supporting the staff recommendation. And yeah, echo the comments as well that other commissioners have made. I think a question I have is whether we, based on, I guess, your point, Erica, do we have any interest in you know, if we have a motion adding criteria F to that?
As to, if we were to deny it, as to one of the reasons why, I would support that.
Larry, I wasn't sure what I understood what you just.
Yeah, so the suggested motion includes stating that there's insufficient evidence regarding criteria B and D. Would we want to add F to that?
Yeah, because F did
I'd
make the
be willing
point.
to support that.
Okay. All right, for whomever. So, Anne, did you want to say anything?
Well, I agree with my fellow commissioners, especially with Erica, about that it's a loss. And I have to say that to everybody involved in this process, I think there's a misconception about what it means to be a historic, to designate your neighborhood as historic neighborhood, because it, I think the misconception is that somehow you lose all your rights as a homeowner, and that's not true, because, you know, that's actually that's a lot of what we do, is that we look at neighborhoods. I think a really good example of a neighborhood that has really benefited tremendously from this is Country Club, which is a neighborhood, a very large and diverse neighborhood that has a really very consistent kind of community feel to it. And one of the things that you give up when you're not designated is that you have no influence at all in what's built.
Right.
And I think the thing that worries me about actually taking out F is that I think I'm sure the applicant has very wonderful ideas, but what's happening to the fabric of the neighborhood, that house could turn out to be anything. It could turn out to be, and that I think is something that should concern people who live in Park Hill, that they want to keep some kind of consistency in their neighborhood. Also, the reason I actually want to just say one more thing. The reason that I ask about what happens next is that as a commission, the most wrenching part of this commission are owner opposed designations. And I've been on the commission now for 6 years, and in that time, city council has only upheld one of them. Because I think that they agree, they feel very much as many of the commenters do that it's a very difficult process. So I have to say that even were we to approve this, that the chances that city council would uphold it are very small.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, which doesn't relieve us of doing our.
No,
our
it doesn't.
duty.
It's just that that's sort of what.
Yeah, yeah, there was, you touched on a couple of things, that I mean, I've known Park Hill for a long time. I went to the Colorado Women's College, so of course I know Montview Boulevard. And, there were some comments about how plain the building was. We have designated plain buildings. That's got nothing to do with that's a subjective comment. So I wanted to put that out there. I also absolutely agreed with the landfill. That's one of my main reasons for being supportive of historic preservation, and that is, however, not in our purview at this time. I also would like to make the point that Anne did, just to reiterate, just because a building is historic, designated historic, doesn't mean that you can't do a lot. I mean, that's exactly why the commission exists. That said, I just wanted to make those points because I feel like, there are so many misconceptions, but I do agree with staff did not make this decision lightly. And so at this point, since we're all seem to be on the same page, I will accept a motion from the floor. Oh, oops, do I have to do something? first?
No, I'm just putting the suggested motion
Okay.
up on the screen. I added F highlighted here. If someone wants to make a motion with F.
I hate to have my name attached to this.
No, right, so.
I'll go ahead. I move to deny the designation application number 2023L-009 for 5013 East Montview Boulevard, based on insufficient evidence demonstrating that the structure meets landmark ordinance criteria B, D, and F, or is related to a historic context or theme, citing as findings of fact the designation application, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the January 23rd staff report.
Do I hear a
I'll
second? Erin has seconded it. Erica made the motion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, the application has been denied. And at this moment, we are going to a 5-minute break. It's 3 o'clock, a little couple of minutes after 3 o'clock, and it's time for a break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
They could go.
All right.
Monday and stuff.
All right. Oh, no. Okay. All right. Okay. I'll live it.
We are recording.
Yeah, it happens. All right, I'm calling the meeting back into session. Thank you very much, everybody. Design review process. We have one design review item on our agenda today, and I will announce said item. Commission members will have to announce any ex parte or any conflicts of interest. Staff will introduce the application and make a recommendation. Of course, we can question the staff. The applicant has 10 minutes to make their presentation, and the commissioners can question the applicant. Then we'll have a public comment period, and each person for the design review process will get 2 minutes per person. Staff can clarify if necessary, commission will deliberate, commission will make the motion and vote. So the one and only design review project that we are seeing today is 2023-COA-625 at 1314 Gilpin Street in the Wyman District. Staff person is Brittany.
So our first application, design review application of the day is for solar panels at 1314 Gilpin Street, which is a contributing structure to the Wyman Historic District. It was constructed circa 1900. You can see the property indicated in an aerial image here. with the historic district boundary indicated in brown. This is a Denver Foursquare home, so it does have a hipped roof with dormers on each roof. Across the alley is a 153-foot tall building. And then across the street on Gilpin Street is another high-rise style building that you can see here in these aerial images. So the applicant is requesting approval for 8 solar panels on the roof of their structure. 5 of the solar panels will be located on the south roof slope, which is an interior roof slope. However, 3 of the panels are located on the west roof slope, which is the primary roof slope facing onto the front of the house and Gilpin Street. Our design guidelines for Denver landmark structures and districts do recommend avoid installing solar panels on the front facing roof plane of a primary structure. It does state that when the front facing roof plane is oriented towards the south and the main solar axis, the commission may consider that placement, provided it does not impact character defining features of that roof form. Again, as I stated, the 3 panels on the front roof slope are oriented towards the west. So this is not a south facing roof plane, and it is not the primary area of access. So staff are concerned about the 3 panels that are located on the front roof slope. So here are some images of the home. The design guidelines do talk about impact to the character defining features. This is an asphalt shingle roof, so it will not negatively impact the roof with the install, and the proposed panels are to be flat mounted onto the roof. So staff generally are supportive of this application for solar panels. However, we are recommending that the 3 panels that are located on the west roof slope be relocated to the north, south, or east roof slope to comply with the guidelines. However, the applicant has stated that due to the high-rise conditions, that this is the best location for those solar panels, and would like to present their case to the commission today. So we are recommending approval with conditions, and that condition being that those 3 panels on the primary front facing roof slope, which is the west roof slope, which you can see in these images here, be relocated.
Oh, great. Brittany, thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Brittany? No? Okay, great. Is our applicant with us, ready to talk? They're not ready for public comment.
PB, you should be able to turn your microphone on and camera if you'd like.
And then I'm also pulling up your letter to the commission that they did. I did send to them previously as well.
Yeah, we can see it. Phoebe, can you hear us?
I can hear you, and I just turned my microphone on.
Great.
I'm trying to get a little bit less than full screen. This opened as full screen, and so I can't see my presentation. I can just tell you, off the top of my head.
Okay, that's great. Phoebe, could you start with your name and address?
Yeah,
before
sorry.
No
Well,
worries,
now-
thank you.
Now I can see it. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Is that what you put on? Is this
Yes, I shared this.
Okay, so I can't change it either.
No.
PB Schechter, 1314 Gilpin Street, or North Gilpin Street, in the modern terminology.
Yeah.
So the photos that you saw are probably from across the street, and the roof of our house is visible from across the street. The photos that I have in my presentation are all taken from the sidewalk in front of the house, which in my opinion is where the defining characteristics of a historic structure are viewed from. And I have really two major points. One point is that the panels won't be visible from the street, from the sidewalk, because the roof isn't visible from the sidewalk. So they can't possibly, the design guideline, I think it's 2.35. I don't remember the number because, again, I didn't print my presentation. I was planning to have it available on my computer, but I still don't know how to get this into less than full screen. But the design guidelines require minimizing visual impact. And you can see from the second picture here, that there'd be no visual impact because you can't see the roof. You can't even see the dormer. You can't see the roof, any part of the roof, not just the part of the roof that the panels would be located on. This is a photo from the neighbors, from the sidewalk in front of the southern neighbor. And I believe the next picture is, that's from the sidewalk in front of the northern neighbor. So anywhere in front of the house, you would not be able to see the roof. And so there won't be any visual impact. Now, as for the south facing, the criterion, as I recall, could you go down a little bit, please, is that not impact the structure's character defining features. That's when they're installed on the front facing roof plane of a primary structure, which we're requesting 3 of the panels to be installed on the front plane. And as you saw from those pictures, the roof doesn't impact the structure's character defining features because you can't see it. The supports for the roof, if you go back a little, please, the supports under the roof, those are characteristic. I don't know how you describe them, but they're intended to be rafters, but they're not. They're just cosmetic, but they're characteristic of houses on this block and probably houses of this age. I don't know. I'm not an expert. Okay, so that's the first thing, that having the panels that we're requesting for the front of the roof might not be consistent with the letter of the guidelines, but they are consistent with the spirit of the guidelines. And so then there's the question, my second point, is why do we want 8 panels? Why don't we just do 5? And, both the city of Denver and the state of Colorado and the federal government all have policies to reduce CO2 emissions and reduce CO2 in the atmosphere. My contractor did a production study, and their estimate is that in the first year, the total energy production from 8 panels, which is 3.24 kilowatts of capacity, will be 3,649 kilowatt hours of electricity. You specify the first year because you might know this. Solar panels have about, I think, 0.5% per year reduction in efficiency over their lives. So the first year is at sort of specified efficiency, as constructed efficiency. With 5 panels, it'd be 2.02 kilowatts of capacity and 2,475 kilowatt hours of electricity. That's about a 32% reduction in output. And, the less electricity that I produce without CO2 emissions, the more electricity the utility will have to produce for me to use with CO2 emissions. Both the city and county, the state, and the federal government, and in fact, Colorado has statutes requiring reduction of CO2 emission to 0 by the year 2030. I'm sorry, have the Colorado Public Service Company of Colorado, which is the largest utility in Colorado and the utility from which this residence receives electricity, has proposed reducing CO2 emissions to 0 by 2030, and that's been essentially approved by their regulator, which is the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, but it matters when the CO2 is emitted. CO2 hangs around in the atmosphere for, well, we don't know, 300 to 1,000 years, so a long time. And in order to retain habitability, not just to recover habitability from some parts of the world, we're gonna, even if we stopped emitting CO2 today, we'd probably have to actively remove CO2 from the atmosphere. So if I can stop emitting some CO2 today, that will be, as opposed to 10 years from now or 7 years from now, that'll be more efficient, less expensive than having to actively remove the CO2 in the future. And then, why not install 8 panels on the south-facing roof? And there it's just an accident of, partly it's an accident of the style of the house, because with dormer, there's 4 dormers, there's 4 chimneys, there's a lot of shadows on the roof at different parts of the day. But there's also 2 20-story high-rises to the south and southeast, and those are shown in picture 4. Yeah, those and then there's another high-rise that's only 13 stories that's behind the house to the east of the house. And in the winter, when solar panels are most efficient, they're less efficient in the summer because of heat. The house is shaded for many hours of the day. When the sun's low in the sky, the house is shaded for many hours a day. In the summer, it's only shaded in the early mornings from Summer House, I believe, which is behind to the east of the house. So that's my argument. It's consistent with the spirit, if not the letter, of the design guidelines, and it's significantly better for not just the environment, but for even the city of Denver has policies and is encouraging in various ways reduction in CO2 emissions. So thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments. I guess they're not comments, I'm an applicant. And I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, the commissioners might have.
Great, thanks, Phoebe. Commissioners, any questions? Erin does.
I have a question. Did you consider the Tesla solar shingles?
I did, and Tesla would not engage with me.
Oh,
really?
I sent them pictures, I sent them lots of stuff, and they said, your project is too small for us.
But we've approved them here in Denver on other residences.
I know that. I
That's
attended a
interesting.
commission. I'm sorry,
No, it's just, that's interesting that they were non-responsive.
I attended a commission meeting when you, I believe, ended up approving a Tesla roof.
Yeah.
It wasn't, maybe it was in Park Hill. I don't remember where.
There's one in Baker.
Yeah,
It was in the east of where I am, yeah. And I was excited about that. I thought, oh, well, maybe I can do that. But well, anyway, they weren't interested.
It's disappointing.
It is disappointing. Any other commissioners question for the applicant? Okay, PB, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. We will go on to see if there are any public comments. Anybody lined up? Nobody's here. Anybody wishing? Doesn't look like it. Okay. All right, there are no public comments, and commissioners, let's go ahead and go on into, or do you have any further questions for Brittany, or do you have anything?
Just if you're not going to, sorry, let me rephrase. So in addition to the guidelines that are referenced in the staff report, you can also consider the intent statements. The intent statements for energy efficiency is 2O, and that states to maintain the inherent energy saving features of historic structures. And then 2P, which is to facilitate energy efficiency improvements to historic structures while ensuring that they are compatible with the building and surrounding historic context. If that helps during deliberation.
Okay, thanks, Brittany. Any other questions for staff? before we go into deliberation? All right, then let us go into deliberation. People, what are you thinking?
It's an effort on the applicant's part
There
to
is.
try to pull this off, given the limited daylight that he has.
Can't believe Tesla. That's. Yeah. A lot of stuff I can't believe, never mind.
That said,
So many other things we could say, yeah.
you want to talk about elongate?
Nick.
That said, I would, look to, I Google Earth the site and looked at what the view is from the middle of the street, which I would argue most of the traffic is in the street, versus, on the sidewalk directly adjacent to the house. And that roof is clearly visible from the middle of the street, so, just something to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I was looking at that, thinking about it, I wondered, given some of the discussion that we had when there was the update to the solar panel guidelines, if it could be supported if, for example, this is hypothetical, but if there were sort of two panels on each side of that west facing dormer to where it didn't, you know, the three being very asymmetrical on one side, and I know that what I'm talking about isn't maybe the most efficient, but it would be if west facing sun does have particular value on this particular site. If there's a friendly comment to the applicant that could be possibly supportable. Curious what other people think about that.
You know, I thought the same thing, because in another neighborhood, I was looking at houses that were like bungalows that had south-facing roofs. And there was one particular example that had a symmetrical array of panels on either side of a symmetrical central dormer. And, you know, because of the color of the roof and the color of the panels, it seemed to be, you know, acceptable and meeting at least the spirit of the guideline, if not actually, to some degree, the intent, I guess is what I should say. So, you know, when I looked at this, I thought that is potentially a more acceptable solution than putting three panels lopsided on a street facing roof. And I don't know how we would go about constructing that as a motion or to make the motion as recommended. And if he wants to consider it and come back, you know, that's an option.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought is that there are some statements made about efficiency due to the shading of adjacent buildings, but there's no study included in the application materials demonstrating how the shading from the adjacent buildings actually affects this particular building, other than in, you know, the numerical data, 5 panels versus 8. So I think both the consideration of doing something symmetrical on the west side, as well as a demonstration in the application of just the impact of shadows to see if there are maybe more appropriate places to put panels that aren't on the west side might be, you know, acceptable, although maybe not as highly efficient as this particular proposal. I don't know, is that clear?
That's mad.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
George?
well, shadowing is definitely an issue with solar, as are trees and other things, but I gotta remember that house was there first before the high rise. I think it complies with the guideline. Well, the guideline indicates an effort to preserve history, and I think that's what's being done here, simply because if you are making historic district contributing home viable, energy costs are certainly a big part of that and need to be minimized. And this is, aside from all of the do-goody stuff about minimizing CO2, we're here for preservation, and making it more preservable is what the guidelines are all about. the guideline also doesn't say where, that I'm aware of, doesn't say what for the visuals of the panels on a front facing or a street facing roof are. All I know is from personal experience, when staff walk by my house and I have a bunch of panels on my street facing side, they were on the sidewalk and they say, we can't see it from here. That's a good thing. Boom, done. So if you can see it from across the street or from the top of the trees or whatever, I think that's irrelevant. It's what is in the street view. We're driving past in that lane next to the house. So making the house energy efficient meets the intent clause, I think. And I'd say that you have to give the applicant credit for already mixing up his arrangements. If he hasn't, then maybe he needs to consider balancing the appearance or something like that. But at least as far as I read the guidelines and intend on applying them, appearance is a backseat as far as the energy efficiency goes. So I can support it with conditions. I can support it with no conditions. So.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I had a question that I think a little bit to Gary's point, without a solar study or understanding that west versus southern benefit. The dormers do break the roof up, but that south facing side of the dormer is also, looks at least in scale to be maybe big enough for 2 panels. And I don't know if there's a diminishing return on the south versus that western sun. You know, but with a condition kind of balancing Larry's comment about symmetry and that lack of a sun study, I feel like the condition that staff provided, you know, requiring that those 3 panels move to a different elevation, perhaps amending it to say something like a symmetrical arrangement or a different elevation. I don't know how folks feel about that in general, but it seems like there's a few options that might still provide more than 5 panels, but also be less asymmetrical, if that's what we're hung up on together.
Can we hear from Rise Power?
They're not present, I think, but I have some input.
Okay.
So the commission in the past has determined that if solar panels are required on front facing dormers, even if it's a not front facing roof slope, if it's a dormer that is on the front of the building, even if in this instance where the south roof is side interior, that still requires review before the commission. So I did also hear some statements about symmetry. So you could always say you can keep the condition as is and add to the condition or symmetrical placement on the west facing roof slope. If that is something that you wanted to consider. But if you don't feel that you have enough information because you need that solar study, that would be a continuance. So if the question is regarding the solar study and you need that solar study for more to better understand this application, that would be a continuance at this point. However, if you are okay with symmetrical placement, or on that south slope of that dormer, you could add that to the conditions and elaborate more on the conditions recommended by staff. Does that answer some questions?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty comfortable with that approach.
Okay, so the approach with the conditions.
Right, yeah, is it true that I don't think any of us have an issue with the panels in general? I guess, Nick, how, you started by talking about that visibility from the street, whether that's a deal breaker or not.
Well, I brought it up because I thought that the photographs in the application were a little deceiving.
From the sidewalk, yeah.
Worm's eye view. And so we should, go into
Sure.
that knowing. But I would support what the majority would want relative to the aesthetic on the west side.
I guess I would be in favor of a continuance rather than approval with conditions, because I actually think that there's sort of a precedent here. And that is that the homeowner, the applicant came in and said, this, and this, and this because of the shadow. And I think that in the future, when people come to us and say it's because of the shadow, they should have the sun study as part of it. And I just, it's a new world out there for us, and we're trying to actually get as many solar panels as we can on, and that's totally what we're trying to do, but I personally think it should be a continuance, and they should include the sun studies, and if they want to do a study at that point of what it would be like to have 2 and 2 symmetrically, because you're right, you're gonna see them from the street, and sorry, my computer's being crazy, so I'm but the guideline is to avoid using solar panels on the front facing roof. But if you do, make sure that it enhances the architecture of the front face.
Okay. Gary, I
Well,
would think
I-
you would support that.
Yes, I think that's a good suggestion. I was gonna make a comment about, because I'm looking at the photograph of the example of another house that has, and the roof is dark. So the panels do not, I mean, they're obvious, but it's not as dramatic as it is in the subject property because the roof is a light colored roof. And I'm thinking about the irony about solar panels versus the move towards light colored roof
Yeah,
because the
right.
higher,
Yeah.
so I think having informed decisions based on study is a good move. Because we don't want to just say, okay, we want to make the house more energy efficient, we want to lower the carbon footprint, so, we'll compromise the intent of the guideline. I'm not in favor of doing that, so
All
I
right.
agree with Dan's.
So how are other people thinking about a continuance? Yeah, so that we can get more information, the solar study, so that we are basing our ideas or our decision on
I agree.
as
I think
much
that,
information
yeah,
as.
I think this is
Do
great.
I need a motion or what do we need?
So you have to continue to a date certain, which, I did previously ask the applicant for a solar study. I don't know if they're, the applicant that we're speaking to today is the homeowner and not the solar company. I don't know how long they would need to get that solar study, so perhaps we bring the applicant back to the table to see if they have a general sense of when they could get that solar
great.
study from their solar company. So PB, we have a question about some of the application materials, and a solar study would be helpful to further understand where the areas of solar gain on your roof are best for the commission to feel more comfortable with this application. Do you know if your solar company is able to produce that, and if they could, when they could get that additional document?
I
to-
think, I'm sorry. I think that they're able to produce it, but I don't know when. This is part of I don't know if you're aware, Denver aggregated a lot of residential customers and bid out all of that capacity to a single company, and Rise Power is the one that won that contract. So, they're both trying to be efficient because they've got a fixed price per panel that they've bid. And but they certainly can do it because I think that I saw a solar intensity. Could I make a comment also, or is it not appropriate? A responsive comment to your deliberations, just to be clear.
That's to the discretion of the chair.
Okay.
Well, yeah, go ahead, PB. What's your comment?
Well, just about the symmetry on the front. The west-facing dormer is going to shade everything on the north side of the front-facing roof. Am I saying that clearly? I mean,
Yeah.
and Warren Village is across the street, so in the late afternoon, that's about 7 stories. It's not as bad as the high rises. It's closer, but not as high. But that in the summer, I wait until the sun goes behind Warren Village for it to start cooling off.
I understand that.
So today is the filing deadline for the February 20th meeting, but that is 4 weeks from now. I feel like that's probably sufficient time.
I agree with you. I mean, they have an investment in getting this approved. So I think
Yeah, they did. Yeah, you're right. They have.
So I would suggest the commission continue to February 20th.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do you have a motion from the commission? To continue till February?
I'll take a shot. Madam Chair, I propose that project 2023-COA-625 be continued until the meeting of February 15th,
20.
20, until the meeting of February 20.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Graham has seconded it. All in favor, aye? Opposed, nay? All right, Phoebe, we'll see you back here on February 20. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Oh, sure. Okay, so we have one final item. It is a business item. Matthew has the opportunity to talk to us about 2023 downtown Denver tax rebate.
You read
program.
the process first.
I must read the process first. The chair will announce each business item. Oops. Staff will introduce the business item. Commissioners can question the staff. The public comment period will be 2 minutes per person. Staff will clarify if necessary. The commission will deliberate and the commission will need to make a motion and vote. Matthew, take it away.
Thank you. That's my bad.
Woo.
The business item before you today is the certification of the 2023 Downtown Historic District Tax Rebate Applicant Pool. We'll be giving you a brief history of the rebate program, list the eligibility requirements, and finally talk about the 2023 applicants. The Downtown Historic District was established in the year 2000. A property tax rebate program for the owners of the buildings in the Downtown Historic District, unique to this district, was also created via Ordinance number 970 to incentivize building owners to renovate their buildings and keep them active. In the summer of 2022, the city made some slight changes to the program, including shifting the application deadline from September 1st to December 1st, better aligning with the city budget adoption process, and expanded the language of the eligibility requirements. Eligibility for the Downtown Historic District Tax Rebate Program requires that building owners must pay property taxes and must not receive funding from the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, or DURA. Street elevations and building systems must be in good repair, and street elevations must be substantially original in appearance, have alterations that comply with the design guidelines at the time of alteration, or remain unaltered since designation. There are 43 buildings within the Downtown Historic District. 5 buildings are not eligible for tax rebates due to DURA funding or tax exempt status. 15 of the remaining 38 eligible buildings in the Downtown Historic District applied for a tax rebate in 2023. In early January, staff visited each of the 15 buildings to assess whether street elevations were in good repair and to determine whether the street elevations were substantially original in appearance since their designation in 2000. Staff found that all 15 of the buildings which had applied for the rebate program in 2023 met the eligibility requirements. Therefore, staff recommends that the Landmark Preservation Commission certify all 15 of the properties in the Downtown Historic District that applied for the tax rebate program in 2023.
All right. Commissioners, any questions for?
I have a question. Do you know why the telephone building at 931 14th Street does not pay property taxes? Or is that an answer that's too long for this?
I don't.
I mean, the other 2 properties are nonprofits or related to nonprofits. But I don't know the telephone company, that's an income producing.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something we would be able to answer.
Robert
The
Spear did
answer, I
that,
don't
right?
think. Just tell you that spreadsheet up.
But we could look into
No, that's
it.
okay, it's just a question.
Excuse me. Any other?
I have a question. I guess I think I sort of missed the whole designation of this area. So 15 of the properties applied for a tax rebate, but are they the only contributing properties within? No, there are many more contributing
Yeah.
properties. Is that correct?
These are all the contributing properties on your screen, so we call our downtown historic district, our chocolate chip historic district. Jen made that up, so essentially, all the buildings that are within the designation are shown on the screen. And they're all considered contributing. Some of them are also individual landmarks, but as it's a non-contiguous district, as you can see here, that's kind of why we call it our chocolate chip. So like every single one of them is a chocolate chip and they are contributing and special.
But we haven't really seen anything in this commission except for, as far as I can see, except for signage. So is this part of the lower downtown? Is this part of the other commission? Because
They probably just aren't having design review projects.
they're
Yeah,
not.
There was a design review project some time ago for one of the buildings on 16th Street.
Oh,
It was
for the
this
win-
one
Oh, yeah.
right here,
Yeah.
and this building that was proposed, 27, I think. The building that was proposed behind it was gonna cantilever over it, and so we reviewed that portion.
Yes, okay.
That was cantilevered, but they revised that design and now that's built, I'm pretty sure. It's very quiet in this district. I have a project that's tentatively going through, I think it's 24, 23, 22 that may be impacted. But again, the vacant parking lot is principally where the project is gonna be, and so it depends on how they design around this vacant parking lot to the north and this vacant parking lot, whether or not we'll see that come in. But it is also an urban design district, so the urban design does a lot of the vacant parcels, which we don't have purview over.
Got it. Thank you. I was just kind of surprised by the whole concept.
It's an interesting district.
Yeah.
Going back to Gary's question. The telephone building, we have it listed as a tax exempt, so not eligible, but I'll look into that. And I'm fairly certain everyone still received the letter to apply. So.
I was just curious as to why it's tax exempt, because
Just because they lose money doesn't
it's a
mean.
commercial property that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, I'll look into that to make sure.
maybe a CIA.
Yeah, right. No, that's a good question, Alicia. Sure, you want the answer, Gary.
Charged it.
All right, any other questions for Matthew? Or nothing? No? Okay,
Don't think there's anyone here to comment, but.
do we have anybody, yeah, public comments? You have 2 minutes each if you wish to comment on this. It doesn't look like we have anyone who wishes to comment, so, all right, let's go into deliberation then. What do you think, commissioners?
I'll just say, like, having the photos, I'm like, oh, these are such great buildings. I'm so
Yeah.
happy these are designated and they have this program. So I just want to say that, but I think it's clearly something to approve.
Awesome. Then do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to certify as qualifying structures all 15 of the properties in the downtown historic district, which applied for the Downtown Denver Historic District Tax Rebate Program in 2023, as per presented testimony and information provided in the staff report.
Larry, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Aaron has seconded it. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Nay, opposed, nay. Nope, it has passed. All right, you have one.
I
thing to
have
do?
one other item. Our new design review supervisor, Amy Amajan, started last week on Tuesday. So she's been with us a week now. I'll allow her to introduce herself though.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Amadon. Gary, I know you from past work.
I was with the city of Aspen for 30 years. Before recently making a huge life change and moving down here as historic preservation officer for 27 and planning director for 3. I have certainly done work in Denver over the years, but I have a lot to learn and I'm looking forward to joining you all. So
Great, welcome.
thank you.
I think we met years ago. I worked on the Ute Cemetery.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course.
With,
Yes, BHA, right?
yeah.
Yeah, wonderful.
All right, anything else for the good of the order?
And we are officially over at Republic Plaza
Yeah.
if you need us. We're on the 22nd floor. You can't get up there, so let us know. If you do need to see us.
Well, I
in
hardly ever
person.
need to see it, yeah, second floor.
So, we'll probably be over there for at least a year. But who's to say? Yeah, so we're the first like big floor that construction has started on, so. But that's it.
Okay, great. Yeah, George, no, anybody else? Okay, cool. All right, I am adjourning the meeting, and it is 10:04. Thank you very much, everybody.
And Brittany.